I'd buried 2 wives in 3 years. Now I was standing on a dusty platform in Bitter Creek, Wyoming, waiting for a third woman who'd probably run screaming within a month. The stagecoach was late. It was always late. Dust devils spun across Main Street, picking up scraps of newspaper and dried horse dung, carrying them past the general store where Mrs. Harper would be watching from her window. The whole town knew what I was doing here. Cole Bennett, the man who couldn't keep a wife alive or present, trying again with another mail-order bride from back east. I had coffee in a tin cup, the same battered cup I'd used to give Beth water in her final hours. Didn't know why I'd brought it. The thing had a chip missing from the rim and rust creeping up one side like an old wound that wouldn't heal. Maybe I wanted this new woman to know from the start what she was getting into. A man with ghosts and a ranch going to hell. Old Tom had tried to talk me out of it that morning. He'd found me in the barn saddling the mare for the ride into town. His weathered face creased with concern, the kind that comes from working alongside a man for 10 years and watching him make the same mistakes over and over. "You sure about this, boss?" he'd asked, not meeting my eyes. "Could hire a cook. Don't need to marry one." But I did need to marry one. The ranch was dying without water. The well had gone dry 2 years back, right after Beth passed. Old Tom and I had been hauling barrels from town ever since, but it wasn't enough. We needed someone who could work, someone who wouldn't expect roses and poetry and all the things I didn't have left in me to give. The stage appeared as a brown smudge on the horizon, growing larger against the pale afternoon sky. My gut tightened. This was it. Grace Abbott, 26-year-old factory worker from Massachusetts, no family to speak of. The broker's letter said she was plain, but hard-working, said she understood what she was getting into, said a lot of things that probably weren't true. The coach rattled to a stop in front of Harper's store. The driver climbed down, opened the door. A woman in lavender silk stepped out first, all bustle and bonnets, the kind of Eastern lady who'd take one look at Wyoming and faint dead away. Then another passenger, a man in a bowler hat who looked like he sold snake oil for a living. Then her. Grace Abbott climbed down slow, one hand gripping the door frame like she needed the support. Brown calico dress faded from too many washings, bonnet that had seen better days. She held a single carpet bag, the handles fraying at the seams. When her boots hit the dirt, she stood there for a moment, taking in the town, taking in the nothing that Bitter Creek had to offer. I stepped forward, her head turned. Our eyes met. She had freckles, lots of them, scattered across her nose and cheeks like someone had splattered her with mud as a child and it had never quite washed off. Her face wasn't pretty, not in the way men wrote songs about. It was honest, open, the kind of face that couldn't hide what it was feeling even if it tried. She walked toward me each step, raising a small cloud of dust. When she was close enough to speak, she stopped, looked up at me, and said the strangest thing, "I'm not pretty." The words came out quiet, almost apologetic, like she was confessing to a crime she'd committed just by existing. "I know the photograph Mrs. Crane sent didn't show my face clearly," she continued, voice getting smaller with each word. "And I should have told you before, but I thought maybe if I just came, if you could see that I can work, that I'm strong and I'm honest and I—" She stopped, swallowed hard, waited for me to send her back. I didn't know what to say. Pretty women had come and gone from my life. Beth had been pretty with her blonde curls and big dreams. Catherine had been handsome in a severe kind of way, all sharp angles and sharper tongue. They'd both left me, one in a pine box, one in the middle of the night. This woman stood here telling me the plain truth about herself before I'd even said hello, so I handed her the coffee. "Long ride," I said. "You must be thirsty." Her fingers wrapped around the cup. Rough calluses met rough calluses, working hands recognizing their own kind. She looked down at the tin cup, at the chip in the rim, at the rust stain that wouldn't come out no matter how hard you scrubbed. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded, turned toward the wagon, reached for her carpet bag. "That all you brought?" "Yes, sir." "Name's Cole." "Not, sir." "Yes, Cole." I loaded her bag into the wagon bed, climbed up onto the seat. She stood there for a moment, still holding the coffee, looking at me like she was trying to figure out if this was real or some kind of trick. "You coming?" I asked. She climbed up beside me, settled onto the hard wooden seat, lifted the cup to her lips and drank. I watched her from the corner of my eye. She didn't flinch at the bitter taste, didn't make a face, just drank it down like medicine she knew she needed. I clicked my tongue at the horses. The wagon lurched forward. We left Bitter Creek behind without another word. The ride out to the ranch took an hour. Grace didn't speak, just sat beside me, hands folded in her lap, eyes taking in everything. The endless brown prairie stretching in every direction, the mountains dark against the western sky, the scattered sage and thistle that somehow survived where nothing else could. I wanted to say something, warn her maybe, tell her what she was riding into, but the words stuck in my throat like I'd swallowed sand. The farmhouse came into view as the sun started its descent. Small, weathered, hunched low to the ground like it was trying to hide from the wind. The barn sagged on one side, the roof needing repairs I hadn't gotten around to in 2 years. The corral fence leaned at angles, posts rotting from the bottom up. Grace sat up straighter. Her eyes moved from the house to the barn to the empty garden plots. Raised beds filled with nothing but dust and a few brown stalks that had given up the fight long ago. She didn't sigh. Didn't make that disappointed sound Catherine had made when she first saw the place. Just looked at it all with those frank eyes and said, "It's honest land. Shows you what it is." Something in my chest loosened. Just a fraction. Just enough to let me breathe a little easier. I pulled the wagon up beside the water trough. The trough was empty, bone dry. Grace climbed down before I could offer help. Her boots hit the ground, raising that same small cloud of dust that followed everything out here. "Kitchen's through there," I said, nodding toward the house. "Bedroom's in the back, outhouse around the side." I grabbed her carpet bag, walked up the porch steps, boots heavy on the boards. The single rocking chair sat empty, its wood darkened where hands had gripped it night after night, year after year. I didn't look at it. Inside, the air tasted stale. Dust motes drifted in the last light from the windows. The cast iron stove held the faint smell of bacon grease gone rancid. I'd been meaning to clean it, meaning to do a lot of things. Grace stood in the doorway, taking it in. The table with 2 chairs, though one was pushed against the wall like it hadn't been used in years. The shelves with tin plates and a coffee pot and a single frying pan. No curtains, no flowers, no photographs on the walls. "Water's been low," I said. "Well's been dry 2 years. I haul what we need from town." 2 years, she repeated softly. "That's a long time." "Long enough." I walked to the back of the house, pushed aside the faded curtain that covered the bedroom doorway, set her bag on the floor beside the narrow bed. "This is yours," I said. "I'll sleep in the barn. You don't have to do that." "I do." She stepped into the room, looked at the bed, the small window, the trunk at the foot that still held Beth's things. I should have cleaned it out, should have given Beth's dresses to the church or burned them or done something other than leave them there like she might come back and need them. "Your first wife," Grace said. "What happened to her?" The question came quiet. Not prying, just asking. "She died," I said. 3 years ago. Fever." Grace's hand moved to the trunk lid but didn't open it. "I'm sorry." "Second wife." "She left. Found something in the barn. Decided she didn't want to stay." "What did she find?" "Letters. Things from Beth. Things that scared her." Grace turned to look at me. In the dim light of the bedroom, her freckles looked darker, like shadows someone had painted on her skin. "Are you trying to scare me?" she asked. "No," I said. "Just telling you the truth." She nodded, seemed to accept that. I left her there in the room where Beth had died. Probably should have warned her about that too, but what was I supposed to say? My wife died in that bed, and I haven't changed the sheets since. Some truths you keep to yourself until you can't anymore. I walked back to the barn, my boots echoing in the quiet. Old Tom was there feeding the horses, pretending he hadn't been watching the house through the gaps in the boards. "She staying?" he asked. "Don't know yet," I said. "Give her a night. See if she's still here come morning. You tell her about Beth some. You tell her about the second one. Some of that too." Old Tom shook his head. "You're a fool, Cole Bennett. Running women off before they even get settled. Not running her off, just being honest. Honesty and kindness ain't the same thing. Maybe not, but it's all I got left. I bedded down in the hay that night, stared up at the rafters where swallows had built their nests, listened to the horses shifting in their stalls, waited for the sound of Grace packing her bag and walking out into the night. It never came. When I woke before dawn, the house was dark and silent. I pulled on my boots, splashed water on my face from the barrel by the trough. The sky was just starting to lighten along the eastern edge, that pale gray that comes before the sun shows itself. I walked toward the house to start coffee, stopped halfway across the yard. Grace wasn't there. The bedroom was empty bed made neat with hospital corners. Her carpet bag sat exactly where I'd left it, but Grace was gone. My heart kicked against my ribs. She'd run. Middle of the night, just like Catherine, just like I'd known she would. Then I heard it, the sound of metal striking earth, rhythmic, determined, coming from somewhere past the barn. I followed the sound to the old oak tree, the only living thing on the property that hadn't given up or died. Its leaves were sparse but green, impossibly defiantly green in this landscape of brown and gray. Grace was there, kneeling beside a hole she'd dug in the earth. A broken shovel lay beside her. Her hands were black with dirt. Her dress was filthy, soaked through with sweat despite the cool morning air. She didn't hear me approach, just kept digging with her bare hands, now scooping out handfuls of dark earth, 3 feet down at least, maybe more. "What are you doing?" I asked. She jumped, looked up at me. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat. Her hands were bleeding. Blisters had formed and burst, leaving raw red patches across her palms. "There's water here," she said. "I can feel it." I stared at her, at the hole, at the dark soil piled beside it, so different from the pale dust that covered everything else. "How do you know my father was a farmer? Before the drink took him, he taught me to read land. Said dark soil means water. Said plants know where moisture hides. This tree's been here longer than I have," I said. "If there was water, I'd have found it." She turned back to the hole, kept digging. "Maybe you weren't looking. I should have told her to stop. Should have said she was wasting her time and her hands. Should have pulled her away from that hole and made her wash up for breakfast. Instead, I knelt beside her, reached into the hole. The soil was different here. Not wet exactly, but denser. Cooler when I pressed my palm against it. "How long you been digging?" I asked. "Since before sunrise. Your hands are bleeding." "I know. Grace." She stopped, looked at me. "Please," she said. "Just let me try." So I let her try. We dug together as the sun climbed higher. I went back to the barn, got a better shovel, one with a handle that wasn't cracked. Took turns digging while the other rested. The hole grew deeper. 4 feet. 5. Old Tom found us around mid-morning, stood at the edge of the hole, arms crossed, watching us work like we'd both lost our minds. "What in God's name are you two doing?" he asked. "Looking for water," Grace said. "Ain't no water under that tree. Cole's checked 100 times. Grace didn't argue, just kept digging. 6 feet down, the soil turned to mud. Grace's breath caught. Her hands sank into it, cold and wet and wonderfully, impossibly alive. She pulled up a handful, let it ooze between her fingers. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered. "Thank you." I knelt at the edge of the hole, reached down, touched the mud with shaking hands. 2 years. 2 years I'd hauled water from town. 2 years watching this land dry up and blow away. 2 years of thinking God had turned his back on this place, on me, on everything I'd tried to build. And this woman had found water in one morning. Old Tom dropped to his knees beside me, stared into the hole like he was looking at a miracle made flesh. "I'll be damned," he breathed. The mud grew wetter as we cleared it away. Water began to seep up from the bottom of the hole, slow and steady as a heartbeat, pooling around our fingers like a secret finally willing to be told. Grace sat back on her heels. Her whole body trembled. Exhaustion or relief or something deeper, I couldn't tell. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman I'd known for less than a day. This woman who'd stood in the dust and told me she wasn't pretty like it was something she needed to apologize for. This woman who dug until her hands bled because she believed water was hiding underneath the death. "You did good," I said. The words came out rough, like I'd swallowed gravel. Grace looked at me. Her eyes were wet. Not crying exactly, just full. "Does this mean I can stay?" "Yeah," I said. "You can stay." Old Tom stood, brushed dirt off his knees, looked from Grace to me and back again. "Well," he said, "I'll be getting breakfast started then, seeing as how we got ourselves a real worker here." He walked back toward the house, shaking his head, muttering something about miracles and fools and women who dig for water in the dark. Grace and I stayed by the hole, watching the water rise, inch by inch. The pool widening, the mud growing wetter, the earth drinking deep after 2 years of drought. "It was here the whole time," Grace said quietly. "Yeah, you just didn't know where to look. I knew where to look. Just stopped believing I'd find anything." She turned to face me. Her hand reached out, rested on my forearm, light, tentative, like she wasn't sure if touching was allowed. "Sometimes," she said, "we stop believing in things we can't see. Doesn't mean they aren't there." I stared at her hand on my arm, at the raw blisters, the dirt ground into her skin like it meant to stay forever. These weren't the hands of someone who'd give up and run. These were the hands of someone who'd fight. "Come on," I said. "Let's get you cleaned up. Old Tom's probably burning breakfast as we speak." She smiled. First smile I'd seen from her. It changed her whole face, made those freckles look like they belonged there, like maybe they'd been put there for a purpose after all. We walked back to the house together. The sun was high now, beating down with that merciless Wyoming heat. But something had shifted. The land felt different. Or maybe I felt different. Maybe that's what hope does when you've been without it long enough. Makes the whole world look new. Grace washed her hands at the pump while old Tom fried bacon and eggs. The three of us sat at the table. Grace in the chair that had been pushed against the wall for a year. Old Tom across from her. Me at the head where I'd sat alone for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to have company. We ate in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than I was used to. Not empty, not lonely, just quiet, comfortable. After breakfast, Grace insisted on seeing the dead garden. She walked the rows of raised beds, touching the brown stalks, examining the soil with those farmer's eyes her father had given her. "This can grow again," she said. "Not without water," I said. "We have water now. We have a seep under an oak tree. Not enough for a garden this size. Then we haul it." "Like you've been hauling for the house." "Grace, what your hands are torn up from one morning of digging. You want to spend all summer hauling buckets if that's what it takes." She turned to look at me. The morning sun caught her face, highlighting every freckle, every line, every honest thing about her. "I didn't come here to sit idle, Cole. I came to work. So let me work." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was being stubborn and foolish, and she'd kill herself trying to save a patch of dirt that wasn't worth the effort. But I'd thought the same thing about the water under the oak tree. And I'd been wrong. "All right," I said. "We'll try." She smiled again. That same smile that changed everything. "We'll need seeds," she said. "I know. Town's 5 miles. We could go tomorrow." I nodded. "Tomorrow, then." That night I sat on the porch in the single rocking chair, watched the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and deep purple. Grace was inside talking with old Tom about what vegetables would grow best in this climate. Their voices drifted through the open window. Ordinary conversation. Everyday talk. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that. Just having voices in the house that weren't my own thoughts echoing off empty walls. The rocking chair creaked under my weight. I'd built this chair for Beth back when I still believed in building things that would last. Back before I learned that nothing lasts. Not love, not life, not even the water that had always run through this land until the day it decided to stop. But maybe I'd been wrong about that too. Maybe some things did last, if you were willing to dig deep enough to find them. I looked at the empty space beside my chair, started thinking about building another one, started wondering if Grace would sit in it, started hoping she would. Then I caught myself, shut down that line of thinking before it could take root. Hope was dangerous. Hope made you careless, made you forget that everything good eventually turned to dust and blew away. but the thought stayed with me anyway, persistent as a weed growing through cracked stone. The next morning we rode to town. Grace sat beside me on the wagon seat, her hands wrapped in clean cloth bandages old Tom had insisted on. The road was rutted and rough, kicking up clouds of dust that settled on everything. Mrs. Harper's general store sat at the center of Bitter Creek's single street. The bell above the door jangled as we stepped inside. The store smelled of coffee beans and lamp oil and something musty that clung to the bolts of fabric stacked along the far wall. Mrs. Harper looked up from behind the counter. Her sharp eyes took in Grace cataloging every detail from the faded bonnet to the mud-stained boots. Missing nothing. "Well, well," she said. "You're the new one, aren't you? Cole Bennett's woman?" Grace's spine stiffened. "I'm his wife, not his woman." Mrs. Harper's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite a smirk. "Not yet, you're not. Not proper-like, anyway." I stepped forward. "We need seeds, Mrs. Harper. Vegetable seeds. Tomatoes, beans, squash, if you have it." Mrs. Harper pulled a wooden box from under the counter. Inside, packets of seeds arranged in neat rows, their paper envelopes yellowed with age but still intact. First one lasted 6 months, Mrs. Harper said, her voice casual, but her eyes watching Grace's reaction. "Pretty thing. All blonde curls and big dreams and not a lick of sense. Ran off with a drummer who came through selling patent medicines and promises." Grace's fingers moved through the seed packets. Tomatoes 5 cents, beans 5 cents, squash 5 cents. Second one stayed longer. Mrs. Harper continued. "Almost a year. Quiet woman. Didn't talk much. Kept to herself mostly. One morning Cole woke up and she was just gone. Poof, like smoke in a strong wind. I could feel Grace tensing beside me, could see her jaw tighten. "I'll take these," Grace said, placing 3 packets on the counter, her voice steady despite the tension radiating off her in waves. Mrs. Harper didn't move to ring up the purchase, just kept watching Grace with those sharp eyes. "You know what both those women had in common." "Honey, I reckon you're going to tell me whether I want to hear it or not," Grace said. Mrs. Harper laughed, sharp and genuine. "Land's sakes, you've got a mouth on you. I like that." She leaned forward, voice dropping. They were both looking for something Cole couldn't give them. Romance, maybe, or excitement, or just someone who'd talk to them and make them feel like they mattered more than the cattle and the crops. Grace counted out 15 cents, placed the coins on the counter one by one. "I'm not here to tear anything down," she said quietly. "I'm here to grow something." Mrs. Harper stared at her for a long moment. Then unexpectedly she laughed again. "Well, bless your heart, that's the first sensible thing any of Cole's women has ever said to me. Maybe you've got more sense than the others after all." She wrapped the seed packets in brown paper. Her expression had softened slightly, though those sharp eyes remained watchful. "Soil's dead, you know. 2 years without water. Nothing's grown on that land since his first wife planted her last crop." "I found water," Grace said, "under the old oak tree. Dug it out yesterday with my own 2 hands." Mrs. Harper's hand stopped moving. "You found what now?" "A spring. Underground. Been there all along. Just needed someone stubborn enough to go looking for it." For the first time since we'd entered the store, Mrs. Harper looked genuinely surprised. "Well, I'll be switched," she murmured. "You actually dug for water on that God-forsaken piece of land?" "In this heat I did. And you found it I did." Mrs. Harper reached under the counter, pulled out another seed packet, tomatoes a different variety than the ones Grace had chosen, set it on top of the wrapped bundle. On the house, she said gruffly, "Consider it a welcome gift, or a peace offering, or just an old woman's curiosity about whether you'll prove me wrong." Grace picked up the extra packet. "Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet, honey. You got a long road ahead of you. And Cole Bennett isn't an easy man to know. Easier to love a stone than to love that man, some would say." "I'm not looking for easy," Grace said. "No," Mrs. Harper said, studying her. "I don't suppose you are." We left the store and loaded supplies into the wagon. As I helped Grace up onto the seat, I saw a rider approaching from the south. Well-dressed, riding a horse too fine for ranch work. Marcus Shaw, My jaw tightened. "Who's that?" Grace asked, following my gaze. "Trouble," I said. Shaw rode up beside the wagon, tipped his hat to Grace with exaggerated courtesy. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "still thinking about my offer?" "I told you no 6 times, Shaw." "Answer hasn't changed." He smiled. "The railroad's coming through, with or without your cooperation." His eyes moved to Grace. Took her in with the kind of look that made my hand move toward the gun on my hip. "New wife?" he asked. "Brave woman. Considering." "Well, accidents happen." The threat hung in the air like smoke. "You threatening me, Shaw?" "Just making conversation, Mr. Bennett. Just making conversation." He tipped his hat again, rode off toward the saloon. Grace watched him go. "Who was that really Marcus Shaw? Works for the railroad company. Wants to buy my land cheap. Doesn't take kindly to being told no. What happens if you keep saying no, don't know yet. But I aim to find out." We rode home in silence. Grace's hand rested on the package of seeds in her lap. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, watching for riders that weren't there. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Shaw's smile, about the way he'd looked at Grace, about the words, "Accidents happen," hanging between us like a noose waiting to drop. Around midnight, I saw orange light flickering on the northern horizon. Fire. I ran to the barn, saddled the mare. Old Tom was already up, had seen it too. "Peterson's place," he said, 2 miles north. Grace emerged from the house still in her nightdress, but pulling on boots. "I'm coming," she said. "No." "Yes." There wasn't time to argue. The 3 of us rode hard toward the fire. The smell of smoke grew stronger as we got closer. Burning wood and burning hay, and something else underneath. Fear. Peterson's barn was fully engulfed. Flames reached toward the sky like demons dancing. His wife and children stood in the yard watching their livelihood burn. Peterson himself was trying to save the cattle, driving them away from the heat. We helped where we could. Contained the fire to just the barn. Kept it from spreading to the house or the other outbuildings. By the time the sun rose, the barn was ash and twisted metal. The cattle were scattered but alive. Peterson's face was black with soot, his eyes red from smoke and crying. 3 men, he said, wore masks, said I should sell to the railroad, said this was what happened to people who didn't cooperate. I looked at old Tom, at Grace standing beside me, her nightdress filthy with ash, at the ruin of Peterson's barn smoking in the early light. "Shaw," I said. Peterson nodded. "Has to be." We rode home as the sun climbed higher. Grace sat close beside me on the wagon, close enough I could feel her warmth. When we pulled into the yard, she looked at me with those honest eyes. "This is going to get worse, isn't it?" she asked. I wanted to lie, tell her everything would be fine, that Shaw was just making noise and wouldn't actually do anything. But she'd asked for truth. "Yes," I said. "It's going to get worse." She nodded, accepted it, climbed down from the wagon, and walked toward the house without another word. That afternoon, old Tom found me in the barn. I was mending harness hands, working automatically while my mind churned through possibilities. None of them good. "You need to tell her," Tom said. "Tell her what about Beth, about what really happened." I told her Beth died of fever. "That ain't the whole truth, and you know it. The whole truth will just scare her off. The partial truth is already scaring her. She deserves to know what she's up against." I set down the harness, looked at the old man who'd been more father to me than my own blood ever was. What if telling her makes her leave? What if not telling her gets her killed? The words hit like a fist to the gut, because he was right. Shaw had killed Beth as sure as if he'd put a gun to her head. Stress and fear and exhaustion, working herself to death trying to save a ranch that men like Shaw wanted to steal. "I can't lose another one, Tom. I can't bury another wife, then fight for this one while she's still alive to fight for." He turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the harness and the truth I'd been avoiding for 3 years. That evening Grace was in the barn when I went looking for her. She was examining the old wooden box I kept on the shelf in the back corner. The box that held Beth's letters, the box Catherine had found. The lid was open. One letter lay on the floor where it had fallen. Grace looked up when she heard me, her face guilty, caught. "I wasn't snooping," she said quickly. The box fell when I was reaching for rope. I'm sorry. What did you read? Just one line. She held up the letter. I fear I'm not strong enough for this land. She set the letter back in the box carefully, like it was fragile, like Beth was fragile. I won't read more, she said. Your past is yours. I should have walked away, should have closed the box and left Beth's secrets buried where they belonged. But something broke in me. Maybe it was the way Grace held that letter like it mattered. Maybe it was Tom's words echoing in my head. Maybe it was just 3 years of carrying the weight alone and being tired of how heavy it had gotten. She wasn't weak, I said. Beth was strong as they come. But this land and the men who want it, they broke her anyway. Grace set the box down, gave me her full attention. What men? Men like Shaw. Men who want things and don't care who they hurt to get them. I sat down on a hay bale, stared at my hands, started talking. Beth came here in '83. We married. She planted that garden you want to bring back to life. Everything grew. Then a man came through. Name was Richard Weaver. Worked for the same railroad investors Shaw works for now. Wanted my land. I said no. Grace sat down beside me. Close but not touching. He started making threats. Subtle at first, then not subtle. Burned our hay, killed cattle. Beth was terrified. But she wouldn't quit. Just worked harder. Planted bigger gardens. Hauled more water when the well started going dry. My voice caught. I forced it to keep going. Summer of '86 drought hit hard. Spring went dry. Same spring you found. Beth refused to let the garden die. Spent day and night hauling water from town. I was out dealing with cattle trying to keep the ranch afloat. Didn't see how bad she'd gotten. I looked at Grace. Her face was calm, patient, waiting for the rest. She collapsed. Same way you did at the oak tree. But Beth didn't get back up. Got fever. Died 3 days later. Doctor said her body just gave out. Grace's hand found mine. Squeezed. Shaw bought out Weaver's contract 6 months after Beth died. Sent me a letter. Said he'd hate to see another tragedy befall the property. I pulled my hand away. Stood up. That's when I understood. They killed her. Not with bullets. With fear. Grace stood too. Moved in front of me, so I had to look at her. Is that why Catherine left? She asked. Yeah. She found these letters. Read about Weaver. About the threats. About Beth working herself to death. Then Shaw sent another letter and Catherine saw it. Thought staying would get her killed. She was probably right. And you didn't tell me this before because women who know the truth don't stay. Grace's hand came up. Touched my face. Rough calluses against rough stubble. I'm not Beth, she said firmly. And I'm not Catherine. I'm still here. And I'm not going anywhere. Shaw threatened you today. Right in front of me. I know. He burned Peterson's barn. I know. He'll come for us next. Probably. And you're still not leaving. She smiled. That same smile that made her whole face different. Cole Bennett, she said. I dug for water until my hands bled. You think I'm scared of some fancy man in a clean suit? Despite everything, I laughed. Couldn't help it. You're either brave or crazy. Can't I be both? Yeah, I said. Guess you can. She went back to examining rope like we'd been discussing harness repairs instead of death threats, like the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. I walked outside, looked at the garden plots in the fading light, looked at the house where 2 wives had lived and died and left, looked at the oak tree where water waited to be drawn up and used, and I thought about what Grace had said. I'm still here. Simple words. But they changed everything. Because for the first time in 3 years, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. Maybe this time someone would stay. 5 weeks after Grace arrived, the garden was the most beautiful thing I'd seen in years. Tomato plants stood 3 feet tall, their leaves dark green and healthy. Bean vines climbed the stakes old Tom had driven into the ground, curling upward toward the sun like they were reaching for something better. The squash had started to sprawl, fat yellow blossoms opening each morning. Then it stopped raining. 3 weeks without a single cloud. The sky burned blue and merciless from horizon to horizon. The air turned so dry it hurt to breathe. And the spring under the oak tree started to slow. Grace noticed it first. I'd wake before dawn to find her already out there, kneeling beside the hole we'd dug, watching the water seep up slower than the day before. She never said anything, just knelt there in the half-light, hands pressed together like prayer, willing the earth to keep giving what it had finally started to share. By the end of the third week, the spring was producing barely a cupful an hour. The garden soil started to crack. The tomato leaves began to curl inward, protecting themselves from the heat. The bean plants drooped, despite Grace watering them every evening with what little we could collect. I found her in the garden one afternoon, standing among the rows with tears running down her face, not making a sound, just crying silent while the plants died around her. "It's not enough," she said when she saw me. "The water, it's not enough." "I know. 3 more weeks like this, and there won't be anything left to save." "I know that too." She turned to look at me. Her face was sunburned, peeling across her nose and cheeks. The freckles had multiplied in the strong light, spreading like they were claiming more territory. "We have to do something," she said. "Grace, it's just vegetables." Her eyes flashed. Don't you dare say that. I'm just saying we've got the cattle to worry about. Got to keep them watered. Can't waste what little spring water we have on tomatoes. It's not just vegetables." She stepped toward me, hands clenched into fists. "It's proof." "Proof of what?" "That something can survive here. That I can—" She stopped, looked away. I understood then. She wasn't fighting to save tomatoes. She was fighting to prove she belonged. Same fight Beth had fought. Same fight that had killed her. The fear must have shown on my face because Grace's expression softened. "I'm not her," she said quietly. "I know that's what you're thinking. But I'm not Beth. I'm stronger than you think. Beth was strong too. Then trust me to know my limits." But I didn't trust that. Couldn't trust that. Because I'd trusted Beth to know when to stop, and she'd worked herself into a grave. "There's another spring," I said. "Behind the eastern ridge. About 1.5 miles from here." Grace's head snapped up. "What used to run year-round before the drought. Might still have water. Haven't checked in 2 years. Why didn't you tell me this before?" The words came out before I could stop them. "Didn't think you'd still be here." The hurt on her face was immediate, raw, like I'd struck her. "I've been here 5 weeks, Cole. 5 weeks of digging and planting and hauling and bleeding, and you still thought I'd leave everyone leaves?" "I haven't. Not yet." She turned away from me, started walking toward the house, stopped halfway there. "You want to know why Catherine really left?" she called back. "I bet it wasn't because she couldn't handle the work. I bet it was because you never let her in. Never trusted her enough to tell her the truth about anything." The words hit home because they were true. "I'm sorry," I said. "Show me the spring. What if it's real? If there's water, show me. Now." "Grace, I'm not asking Cole. I'm telling you. Show me the spring or I'll go find it myself." I looked at her standing there in the dust, shoulders back, chin up. Stubborn as old Tom had said. Stubborn and brave and too damn determined for her own good. "All right," I said. "Get your bonnet. It's a long walk." We set out an hour later. Grace carried 2 empty buckets. I carried 2 more and a coil of rope. Old Tom stayed behind to watch the place, his knowing eyes following us as we left the yard. The walk was hot and hard. The sun beat down without mercy. Sweat soaked through my shirt before we'd gone 1/2 mile. Grace kept pace beside me, not complaining, not asking to rest. Just putting one foot in front of the other, like she'd walk until she dropped. After a while I started talking. Don't know why. Maybe it was the heat making me loose-tongued. Maybe it was guilt over what I'd said about not thinking she'd stay. Maybe it was just time. "My first wife was named Elizabeth," I said. "Beth," everyone called her. "She came from Boston. Factory girl like you." Grace glanced at me but didn't speak. Just listened. "We married in '83. She was 19. Had these big dreams about making the ranch into something special. Planted that garden her first spring. Everything grew. She had a gift for it. What happened to her man came through in '84. Richard Weaver, worked for Eastern Railroad investors, wanted to buy my land cheap. I said no. I adjusted my grip on the buckets. The handles were already cutting into my palms. He didn't take it well. started making threats, burned our hay supply one night, killed 3 head of cattle and left them to rot in the sun. Beth was terrified, but she wouldn't let me see it. Just worked harder. Like if she could make the ranch profitable enough, we'd have money to fight him off. The ridge came into view ahead of us, steep and rocky with scrub brush clinging to the slopes. Summer of '86 drought hit. Our well went dry. Same well you found water under. Beth refused to let the garden die. Spent day and night hauling water from town. I was dealing with the cattle trying to keep them alive. Didn't see how exhausted she'd gotten. I stopped walking. Grace stopped beside me. She collapsed one day in August, just fell down in the middle of the garden. I found her an hour later, got her inside, sent for the doctor. She got fever that night, died 3 days later. My voice had gone rough. I cleared my throat. Doctor said her body just gave out. Stress, exhaustion, dehydration. Said she'd worked herself to death. Grace's hand found mine, squeezed. "That's why you're scared," she said. "Not of the drought, of watching it happen again." "Yeah. I'm not going to die, Cole. You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because I'm going to tell you when I'm tired. Going to ask for help when I need it. And I'm going to trust you to believe me when I say I can handle something." She pulled her hand back, started walking again. "Now show me this spring." The spring was behind the ridge, tucked into a cleft in the rocks where shade kept the ground cooler. A thin stream of water trickled from a crack in the stone. Not much, but flowing. Grace dropped to her knees beside it, cupped her hands under the stream, brought the water to her lips, drank deep. "Thank God," she breathed. "It's not much. It's enough. We can haul from here. Grace, that's 1.5 miles each way. 3 miles round trip. You want to make that walk twice a day carrying full buckets if that's what it takes. Your hands are barely healed from digging the well." She held up her hands. Calluses had formed over the blisters, thick and yellow. "Working hands getting stronger. Then they'll get tougher," she said. We filled all 4 buckets. I rigged the rope through the handles so I could carry 2 on each side balanced across my shoulders. Grace started to pick up her buckets. "No," I said. "I'll carry all 4. You walk ahead and watch the path." "Cole, please, Grace, let me do this one thing." She studied my face, saw something there that made her nod. "All right, but tomorrow we both carry. We'll see." The walk back was slow. The weight of the water pulled at my shoulders made my back ache. But it was good pain, purposeful. I was carrying water to save Grace's garden, to give her the thing she was fighting so hard for. Halfway home, she started asking questions. "What happened to Weaver?" "The man who threatened Beth." "Don't know. He disappeared after Beth died, sold his contract to someone else." "Who man named Marcus Shaw?" Grace stopped walking. "Shaw. The man from town. The one who threatened me." "Same one. And you didn't think to mention this before, was trying not to scare you." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "Cole, I'm not scared of Shaw. I'm scared of you not trusting me with the truth. I trust you. Then prove it. Tell me everything. No more secrets. No more protecting me from things you think I can't handle." So I told her. About Shaw's letter 6 months after Beth died. About how he'd said he'd hate to see another tragedy befall the property. About how I'd understood then that Weaver's harassment hadn't been random. It had been deliberate, calculated, meant to break us. They killed her, I said, not with bullets, but with fear and exhaustion and threats they knew she couldn't fight. Grace was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was hard. "Then we don't let them win. We save the garden. We keep the ranch. We show Shaw that we're not Beth and Weaver. We're stronger than that. It might get violent. I'm not afraid of violence. Not when it's righteous." I looked at this woman I'd known for 5 weeks, this woman who'd gone from desperate mail-order bride to fierce defender of a patch of dirt and some half-grown tomatoes. This woman who saw clearly what I'd been hiding from for 3 years. "Shaw won't stop," I said. "Not until he owns this land, or we're all dead. Then we'd better make sure it's not us who ends up dead." We made it home just before sunset. Old Tom helped unload the buckets, watched as Grace carefully poured water over each tomato plant, each bean vine, each struggling squash. "You two are damn fools," he said, "but admirable fools." That night Grace wanted to go back for more water. I told her no, told her we'd go in the morning. She argued. We compromised. We'd go at dawn and again at dusk. 2 trips a day. It nearly killed us both. The first night was the worst. We set out in the dark, guided by moonlight and memory, filled the buckets, started back. Grace's hands blistered again within an hour. The old wounds reopened. I saw blood on the rope handles, but she didn't say anything, just kept walking. By the time we got back, her hands were bleeding freely. I stopped her at the pump, made her set down the buckets. Let me see. I'm fine. Grace. She held out her hands. Blood ran down her wrists, dripping onto the dirt. The blisters had burst open, leaving raw red flesh exposed. Jesus Christ. I grabbed the bandages old Tom kept in the barn, wrapped her hands as gentle as I could. She hissed in pain but didn't pull away. We're done for tonight, I said. The garden needs more. The garden can wait. You can't. Cole. I said no. I didn't mean for it to come out as harsh as it did. But the fear was riding me hard. Fear of watching her work herself to death the same way Beth had. Grace jerked her hands away. The bandages were already soaking through with blood. You don't get to tell me no, she said. This is my fight too. It's just vegetables. It's my proof, my way of showing I belong here. You want to take that from me? I want you alive. Then help me instead of trying to stop me. She picked up the buckets with her bandaged hands, started toward the garden. I watched her go, torn between grabbing her and shaking sense into her and just letting her do what she needed to do. Old Tom appeared beside me, his weathered face creased with concern. Let her work, he said quietly, but stay close. That's all you can do. The second night was worse. Grace's hands stiffened overnight, the muscles seizing up from the damage. She could barely grip the bucket handles, but she refused to stay behind. We made the walk in silence, filled the buckets, started back. A mile in, I heard her stumble, caught her elbow before she fell. I'm fine, she said automatically. No, you're not. Just tired. We can rest. The water will get warm. Plants need it cool. Grace, please, Cole, just let me finish this. So we kept walking, but I watched her like a hawk, saw her vision wavering, saw her steps getting unsteady. Half a mile from home, she went down. One moment she was walking beside me. The next she was on the ground, buckets fallen water spilling into the dust. I dropped my own buckets and caught her before she could hit the earth face first. Her body was limp, dead weight, unconscious. Grace. I shook her gently. Grace, can you hear me? Nothing. I gathered her up in my arms, left the buckets where they'd fallen, ran for the house. Old Tom met me at the door, saw Grace's pale face, her bandaged hands, the blood soaking through the cloth. Dear God, he breathed. What happened? She collapsed. Get water. Cool cloths. I carried her to the bedroom, laid her on the bed. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Sweat soaked through her dress despite the cool evening air. Tom brought water and cloths. We worked together, washing her face, cooling her down. I unwrapped her hands. The blisters were infected, red streaks running up toward her wrists. She needs a doctor, Tom said. Nearest doctor's in Laramie, 2-day ride. Then we do what we can here. I've got some salve in the barn, might help with the infection. He hurried out. I stayed beside the bed holding Grace's hand, the hand that was tearing itself apart for a garden. For proof. For belonging. I can't watch you destroy yourself, I said to her unconscious form. I did that with Beth. Let her work herself sick. Let her die thinking she had to prove something. I won't make that mistake again. Her eyes fluttered open, focused on my face. I'm not Beth, she whispered. I know, and I'm not leaving. I know that too. That's what scares me. Her fingers tightened on mine, weak but determined. Why does it terrify you that I'm staying? I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd dug until she bled, who'd hauled water until she collapsed, who'd fought for tomatoes like they were treasure. Because Beth stayed too, I said. She stayed, and she fought, and she worked herself to the bone trying to make this place into something worth having. And I couldn't save her. I let her die in this very room, in this very bed. Couldn't do anything but watch. My voice broke. I didn't try to hide it. I swore after she died that I'd never let myself care that much about anyone again, never give someone that much power to destroy me. Then Catherine came and I kept that wall up, and she left because I wouldn't let her in. I looked down at Grace's hand in mine. But you climbed over that wall without even trying, dug your way under it, found water I'd stopped believing existed, made me hope again when I'd forgotten how. I brought her hand to my lips, pressed a kiss to her torn knuckles. So yes, I'm terrified, because if I lose you, it won't be like losing Beth. It won't be like Catherine leaving. It'll be worse. Because this time I chose to let someone in. This time I knew better and did it anyway. Grace's other hand came up, touched my face. Rough bandages against rough stubble. Then fight for me, she said. Don't just sit back and wait for tragedy. Fight. I don't know how to fight for someone who's destroying themselves. Then help me stop. Help me see when I've gone too far. I need you to be my mirror, Cole, to show me what I can't see when I'm too close to the work. I can do that. And I need you to believe I'm strong enough to tell you when I need help. I'll try. Not try. Do. Her voice was getting stronger, color coming back to her cheeks. Old Tom returned with the salve. We treated her hands properly this time, cleaned out the infection, applied medicine, wrapped them in fresh bandages. No more hauling tonight, Tom said firmly. And tomorrow you rest, both of you. The garden. Grace started. We'll survive one day without extra water. You won't survive another night like this. He left us alone. Grace tried to sit up. I pushed her gently back down. Rest, I said. Stay with me. Yeah, I'll stay. I sat on the edge of the bed, held her hand, watched her eyes drift closed, watched her breathing even out as sleep claimed her. And I made a decision. Whatever came next with Shaw, with the drought, with the garden, I wouldn't let Grace face it alone. Wouldn't let her work herself to death trying to prove she belonged. She already belonged, had from the moment she stepped off that stage and told me the truth about her freckled face. 2 days later, we had a visitor. I was in the barn when I heard the horse. Walked out to see a man I didn't know riding up the drive. Well-dressed. Good horse. The kind of man who didn't belong out here unless he wanted something. He stopped at the house. Dismounted. Grace came out onto the porch wiping flour from her hands. She'd been baking bread, letting her hands heal, while old Tom and I handled the water hauling. "Can I help you?" she called. "I'm looking for Cole Bennett," the man said. I stepped out from the barn, walked toward them. "I'm Bennett." The man turned, studied me with sharp eyes. "James Walsh," he said, "Catherine's brother." My stomach dropped. "What do you want?" "Came to check on your new wife. Make sure she's not going to disappear like my sister did." Grace looked from Walsh to me and back again. "Your sister is, Catherine was Catherine Bennett for about 10 months. Now she's back to being Catherine Walsh." Walsh pulled an envelope from his saddlebag, held it out to me. "She wrote to me before she left. Said she found something. About your first wife. Something that scared her enough to run." I took the envelope, recognized Catherine's handwriting on the front. "What's in here, truth?" She kept it. "Thought someday you might need proof of what Shaw's capable of." I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. Not from Catherine. From Marcus Shaw to me, dated 3 months after Beth died. The words were polite, professional, but the threat underneath was clear as glass. "Mr. Bennett, I trust your recent loss has given you perspective on what truly matters. A man who's buried one wife should be cautious about risks to a second. The railroad moves forward, with or without willing sellers. I suggest cooperation." Grace read over my shoulder. I felt her go rigid. "He threatened," Catherine Walsh said. "Same way he threatened your first wife." Catherine read Shaw's letters. Read your wife's letters about Weaver's harassment. Put it all together. Realized she was next in line. Why didn't she tell me I asked? Because she thought you'd rather die than sell. Thought you were too stubborn to save yourself, let alone her. So she ran. Walsh looked at Grace. "You should run too," he said bluntly. "Shaw doesn't stop. He'll burn you out or work you to death or find some other way to get what he wants." Grace's jaw set. "I'm not running. That's what Catherine said at first. I'm not Catherine. Walsh sighed, looked at me. You plan to fight him, I do. You'll lose. Shaw's got money and men and the railroad behind him. You've got what? A dried-up ranch and a woman with more courage than sense. I've got enough. Walsh shook his head, mounted his horse. Your funeral, he said. Just thought you should know what you're up against. He rode off. Grace and I stood in the yard, the letter in my hands. The truth finally laid bare. He's right, Grace said quietly. Shaw won't stop. I know. He'll come for us the way he came for Beth. Probably. She turned to face me. Then we stop him first. Before I could answer, old Tom called from the barn, his voice urgent. Cole, Grace, you need to see this. We ran to where he stood at the edge of the property looking north. Orange light flickered on the horizon. Another fire. Peterson's again, Tom said. Or someone else's, I said grimly. We rode north, found 3 ranchers standing in front of what used to be a hay barn. The structure was ash. The men were soot-covered and furious. Shaw's men, one of them said when he saw me, came through an hour ago. Said if we didn't sell, this was just the beginning. How many of you has he threatened? I asked. All of us, another rancher said. Every property within 10 miles of the proposed rail line. We need to band together, I said. Refuse to sell, defend each other's property. Against Shaw's hired guns. We're ranchers, not soldiers. Then we learn to fight. Or we lose everything. They looked at each other. The oldest one, a man named Miller, finally nodded. All right, Bennett, what's your plan? We met in town 3 days later, 5 ranchers, Pastor Reynolds, Mrs. Harper, and Grace, who insisted on coming despite her still healing hands. I laid out the situation. Shaw wanted our land for the railroad, would use intimidation, arson, maybe murder to get it. We could sell and lose our homes, or we could fight. Fight how Miller asked. We're not gunfighters. We don't have to be. We just have to make it more expensive for Shaw to take the land than to route the railroad around us. How do we do that? Guard each other's property in shifts. Set watches. Make sure no ranch is left undefended, and document everything, every threat, every fire, every act of violence. Pastor Reynolds leaned forward. You're talking about building a case against Shaw. Eventually. But first we survive. Then we seek justice. Grace stood. All eyes turned to her. I can shoot, she said. Proved it to my satisfaction yesterday. I'll take a watch shift. Mrs. Harper surprised everyone by standing too. I've got a rifle. Haven't fired it in 20 years, but I remember how. Count me in. One by one they agreed. We divided into teams, set up a rotation, planned signals for if anyone needed help. As the meeting broke up, I pulled Grace aside. You don't have to do this, I said. Can still catch the stage east. She looked at me like I'd suggested she cut off her own arm. Cole Bennett, after everything you still think I'd run, just giving you the option. I don't want options. I want this. This land. This fight. You. The last word hung between us, heavy with meaning. You sure about that? I asked. I'm not an easy man, Grace. Got ghosts and guilt and a temper when pushed. I'm sure. Could get killed standing beside me. Could get killed doing anything. At least this way I die for something that matters. She walked away before I could respond. Left me standing there wondering how I'd gotten so lucky and so terrified at the same time. That night the storm came. Clouds rolled in from the west, thick and dark and swollen with moisture. The first drops hit my face around sunset, big and cold and wonderfully wet. Then the sky opened up. Rain came down in sheets, driving sideways in the wind, soaking through clothes in seconds, turning the dust to mud. Grace ran for the garden. I followed, found her trying to cover the plants with burlap to protect them from the pounding rain. We worked together in the downpour, covering, securing, protecting what we'd fought so hard to save. By the time we finished, we were both soaked to the skin, covered in mud, shivering in the sudden cold. We stood in the garden rain streaming down our faces. Grace started laughing, full and rich and completely uninhibited. What's funny? I shouted over the roar. Everything. Nothing. We nearly killed ourselves hauling water, and now God's dumping it on our heads for free." I laughed too. Couldn't help it. She turned to face me. Rain plastered her hair to her skull, made her freckles stand out dark against pale skin. "Thank you," she said. "For what? For letting me stay, for letting me fight, for seeing me as a partner instead of just another wife who'll leave or die." I reached out, touched her face, brushed wet hair back from her forehead. "You stayed when the storm came," I said. "Beth would have run. Catherine did run. But you're here." "Of course I'm here." I kissed her. Right there in the rain and mud. Kissed her like she was air and I was drowning. Like she was water and I'd been thirsty my whole life. When we pulled apart, she was smiling. "About time," she said. "Should have done it sooner." "Yes, you should have." We walked back to the house hand in hand, changed into dry clothes, sat at the table drinking coffee while the rain hammered against the roof. Old Tom came in from the barn dripping wet, grinning like a fool. "Well," he said, "looks like things are changing around here." "Just the weather," I said. "Sure, boss. Just the weather." He winked at Grace and went to bed. Grace and I sat up late talking, really talking, about Beth, about Catherine, about the life Grace had left behind in Massachusetts, about Shaw and the fight coming, about what we'd do if we survived. When the rain finally stopped, we walked outside. The world smelled clean, fresh. The garden glistened in the moonlight. Grace knelt beside the tomato plants, pushed aside leaves looking for something. "Cole," she breathed. "Come look." I knelt beside her. She pointed to a small yellow flower, perfect and bright, the first bloom on the largest plant. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it. I stared at that flower. Beth's seeds, Grace's hands, water from land that had tried to kill us all. Beth would be happy," I said, "to see her seeds bloom again after all this time." Grace turned to me. Her hand found mine. "Do you think she'd approve of me?" "Yeah. I think she would." We sat in the mud staring at that single yellow flower, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. Not the absence of trouble. We still had Shaw to deal with, still had the drought, still had 100 problems waiting to crush us. But peace with the past, peace with the choices that had led me here, peace with loving someone enough to risk losing them. "I love you," I said. The words came out rough but true. Don't know when it started. Maybe when you found the water. Maybe when you told me the truth about your face. But I love you. Grace squeezed my hand. "I love you too. And I'm not going anywhere. So you'd better get used to having me around." I kissed her again, soft and sweet and full of promise. Tomorrow we'd face Shaw. Tomorrow we'd fight for this land. Tomorrow we'd deal with all the threats and dangers waiting in the wings. But tonight we had yellow flowers and rain-washed air and each other. And that was enough. Shaw gave us 1 week, 7 days to sign over the land or face what he called consequences. The ultimatum came in a letter delivered by one of his men, a scarred thug named Red Carver, who smiled when he handed it to me like he was looking forward to whatever came next. I burned the letter in the stove, but the words stayed with me. "You have until sunset next Saturday. After that, accidents will happen." Starting with the woman. Old Tom found me in the barn that night working on the second rocking chair I'd started building the week Grace arrived. The wood was smooth under my hands now, sanded and oiled, until it gleamed even in the dim lamplight. "You love that girl," Tom said. "Wasn't a question." "I do." "Then you got to stop Shaw before he does to her what he did to Beth." "I know." Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke words I'd been dreading to hear. "I saw Weaver's men the night before Beth got sick, 3 of them messing with the water barrel behind the house, the one Beth used for drinking water." My hands stopped moving on the chair. "What are you saying, Tom?" "I'm saying Beth didn't just die from exhaustion. I think they poisoned the water, made her sick on purpose." The sandpaper fell from my hand, hit the barn floor with a soft thud. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Had no proof." "Still don't. But I know what I saw, and I know Beth went from healthy to dying in 3 days. Fever that strong that fast. That ain't natural." Rage built in my chest, hot and tight and murderous. They killed her. Actually murdered her. I believe so. And Shaw's the same kind of snake Weaver was. Maybe worse. I stood, walked to the barn door, stared out at the house where Grace was probably getting ready for bed, where Beth had died thinking she'd just worked too hard. I won't let it happen again, I said. Then we prepare for war, because Shaw's coming whether we're ready or not. The next 6 days passed in a blur of preparation. We fortified the house, boarding up windows, stockpiling ammunition. Peterson and Miller took turns keeping watch. Mrs. Harper sent word through town about Shaw's threats, making sure everyone knew what was happening. Grace practiced shooting every evening, started out barely able to hit the side of the barn. By day 6, she could put 3 shots in a tin can at 30 yards. "You're getting good," I said, watching her reload. "Good enough to kill a man if I have to." The question stopped me cold. "Yeah," I said, "good enough for that." She nodded, set her jaw, fired 3 more rounds dead center. On the 6th night I brought the finished rocking chair out to the porch, set it beside the old one. The wood was pale and new next to the weathered gray of the chair I'd built for Beth. Grace came out, saw it. Her hand went to her mouth. "When did you make this nights?" "When I couldn't sleep. Been working on it since the week you arrived." She sat in it, rocked gentle. Her hand reached out, found mine. We sat like that as the sun set, watching the garden where tomatoes were finally starting to ripen, waiting for the violence we knew was coming. "Are you scared?" Grace asked. Terrified. "But I'm not running. Not this time." "Neither am I." Day 7 came with a sunrise that painted the sky blood red. Old Tom saddled up early to ride the fence line check for any sign of Shaw's men. I told him to stay close. Told him to fire 3 shots if he saw anything. He was supposed to be back by noon. By 2 o'clock I was pacing. By 3 I was saddling my own horse. Grace grabbed my arm. "Something's wrong. I know. I'm coming with you." "No. You stay here with the rifle. Anyone comes near this house who isn't me or Tom, you shoot first and ask questions later." "Cole. Please, Grace. I need to know you're safe." She wanted to argue. I could see it in her eyes. But she nodded. "Be careful. Always am." I rode out following Tom's usual route. Found his horse a mile north, wandering riderless. Blood on the saddle. A note tied to the horn. My hand shook as I read it. "We have your foreman. You have until sunset tomorrow to sign over the land. Come alone to the old Miller place. Otherwise the old man dies. And then we come for the woman." The note was signed with Shaw's neat handwriting. I rode back hard, found Grace on the porch with the rifle across her lap. She took one look at my face and stood. "What happened?" "They took Tom." Her face went white. "Is he alive?" "For now. Shaw wants the land by sunset tomorrow. What are we going to do? I don't know yet." I showed her the note. She read it twice, her hands clenched into fists. "We have to get him back. It's a trap. I don't care. Tom's family. We don't leave family behind. Grace, if I go, I might not come back. Then we go together. We get Tom and we end this." She said it with such certainty, such absolute conviction, like there was no other choice worth considering. Shaw said, "Come alone." "And you trust Shaw to keep his word?" She shook her head. "We go together. We bring Peterson and Miller. We go in smart, and we get Tom back, and we make Shaw pay for Beth." That was the moment I knew for certain I'd marry her. Not because she was brave, though she was. Not because she loved this land, or could grow tomatoes in drought conditions, or had found water where I'd given up looking, but because she understood what mattered: family, justice, standing up to evil even when it would be easier to run. I pulled her close, kissed her hard. "All right," I said, "we do this together." We rode to town as the sun started its descent, found Peterson, Miller, and 2 other ranchers at Harper's store, told them what had happened, showed them the note. Peterson's jaw tightened. "Tom saved my cattle when Shaw's men scattered them. I owe him." Miller nodded. "Count me in." The others agreed. 5 of us, against Shaw and however many guns he'd brought. Mrs. Harper came out from behind the counter, handed me a box of ammunition. "On the house," she said. "Bring Tom back, and give Shaw what he's got coming." Grace insisted on coming despite every argument I made. Finally, Peterson spoke up. "Let her come, Cole. Woman's got a right to defend her own home. It's dangerous. So's living. She's tougher than you give her credit for." I looked at Grace standing there with her rifle in her bandaged hands and her freckled face set in determination. "All right," I said. "But you do exactly as I say. We'll see about that." Despite everything, I almost smiled. We rode out as dusk fell. The old Miller place was 8 miles northeast, abandoned for 5 years since Miller's father died. Perfect place for an ambush. We left the horses a mile out, approached on foot. I went in front, Grace beside me. Despite my insistence, she hung back. Peterson and the others circled around to flank. The barn loomed against the darkening sky. Light showed through gaps in the boards. Someone was inside. I motioned for Grace to stay behind cover in the rocks. She grabbed my arm. "Be careful. Always am." "I love you," she said. First time she'd said it out loud. The words hit me like a fist to the chest. "I love you too. Now stay down and keep that rifle ready." I walked toward the barn, boots crunching on gravel. Making enough noise they'd hear me coming. Wanted them to think I'd come alone like the note demanded. The barn door opened. Shaw stepped out, Red Carver beside him. 2 more men flanked them, rifles ready. Mr. Bennett Shaw said, "Punctual as always. Where's Tom inside?" "Alive. For now. Let me see him." Shaw gestured. One of his men dragged Tom out. The old man's face was battered, blood crusted on his lip, but his eyes were sharp, alert. "You shouldn't have come, boss," Tom said. "Couldn't leave you here." Shaw smiled. Touching. Really. But futile. "I assume you brought the deed." I pulled papers from my pocket. Not the deed, just blank pages folded to look official. "Let Tom go first. Sign first. Not until I know he's safe." Shaw's smile widened. "You're not in a position to negotiate, Mr. Bennett. Neither are you." At my words, Peterson and the others stepped into view from their flanking positions. Rifles raised. Shaw's face darkened. I said, "Come alone. And I don't take orders from murderers." "Murderers?" Shaw's hand moved toward his gun. "Careful with accusations, Bennett. You killed my wife, had Weaver poison her water, made her sick, let her die thinking it was her own fault." Shaw's eyes flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. Confirmation. "Prove it," he said. "Don't need to prove it, just need to make sure you don't do it again." That's when everything went to hell. One of Shaw's men fired. The shot went wide, hitting the barn wall behind me. But it was enough to start the avalanche. I drew and fired, hit the man who'd shot at me. He went down screaming. Shaw's other men scattered diving for cover. Red Carver got off 2 shots before Peterson's rifle cracked. Red grabbed his shoulder, blood blooming through his shirt. Tom broke free from the man holding him, tackled him to the ground. Gunfire erupted. The barn became chaos. Smoke and noise and the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. I saw Shaw running for his horse, couldn't let him escape, not after everything. "Shaw." He turned, drew his gun. We fired together. His shot went wide, mine didn't. Shaw stumbled, looked down at the blood spreading across his chest, looked back up at me with something like surprise. "You," he started, then fell. I ran to him, kicked his gun away, knelt beside him. "You killed Beth," I said. "Admit it." Shaw coughed. Blood flecked his lips. He gasped. "In the way. Just like you. Did you poison her water?" Weaver did. Shaw's breathing was getting shallow. "I just gave the order. Why money? Always, always money." He coughed again. More blood. His eyes started to glaze. "Railroad always wins," he whispered. Maybe I said, "But you won't see it." He died looking at the barn rafters. No last words. No dramatic speech. Just death. Same as he'd given Beth. I stood. The shooting had stopped. The other men were dead or run off. Tom stood beside Peterson, battered but alive. Then I heard Grace scream. I spun. Saw Red Carver on the ground, gun raised pointing at me. Saw Grace running from the rocks where I'd told her to stay. Saw her rifle come up. Heard the crack of her shot. The bullet hit Red in the leg. He jerked, dropped his gun, clutched at his thigh, screaming, then collapsed. Grace lowered the rifle. her whole body shaking. I ran to her, caught her as her legs gave out. "I shot him," she whispered. "I had to shoot him. You saved me. I didn't want to, but I had to." I held her while she shook, while the reality of what she'd done settled into her bones. Tom came over, put his hand on her shoulder. "You did good, girl. Saved Cole's life. Saved all of us." Grace looked at him, tears streaming down her face. I didn't think I could." "Means you got a good heart," Tom said. "Killing should never be easy, but sometimes it's necessary." The marshal arrived 2 days later. James Walsh had ridden to Laramie to fetch him soon as he heard about Shaw's ultimatum. The marshal looked at Shaw's body, at Red Carver, at the burns on Tom's hands where Shaw's men had tortured him for information. "Looks like self-defense to me," the marshal said. "Shaw's wanted for land fraud across 3 territories anyway. You just saved the state a trial." He took statements from all of us. Grace told him about shooting Red, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You did what you had to do, ma'am," the marshal said. "No charges. Red Carver didn't die. The leg wound got infected, but the doctor in town saved him. He was sentenced to hang for the murder of a ranch hand we hadn't even known about. Peterson's nephew killed 6 months back when he'd tried to stop Shaw's men from rustling cattle. The town testified against Shaw's operations. Mrs. Harper provided evidence of threats. Other ranchers showed burn scars and destroyed property. The marshal compiled it all into a report that shut down the railroad's land acquisition attempts in our territory. We buried Shaw in the town cemetery. Nobody came to the funeral except the pastor. Even God seemed to want him underground quick. 3 weeks after Shaw died, the tomatoes ripened. I found Grace in the garden picking them into a basket. Her hands had healed calluses thick and strong. She held up a tomato red and perfect. "Beth would have loved this," she said. "Yeah, she would have. Tell me about her. Really tell me. Not just how she died, how she lived." So I did. Told Grace about Beth's terrible singing, her burned biscuits every Sunday morning, the way she'd laugh at my jokes even when they weren't funny. The small, ordinary things that make up a life. Grace listened. Kept picking tomatoes. "She sounds like she was wonderful," Grace said. "She was. I'm glad you loved her. Means you know how to love." She smiled. "Means you might love me too." I pulled the ring from my pocket. My mother's silver ring, the one I'd given Beth, the one Catherine had thrown at me. "I do love you," I said. "And I want to do this right. Not mail-order papers. Not desperation. I want you to choose me. Proper." I knelt in the garden dirt. "Marry me. Not because you need a home or I need help. Marry me because we choose each other." Grace stared at the ring. Tears welled in her eyes. "Are you sure I'm not—" "Don't," I said. "Don't say you're not pretty. Don't say you're not enough." "But I'm—" "You're honest," I interrupted. "You're real. You're the kind of beautiful that grows stronger the longer I know you. I don't need pretty, Grace. I don't need fancy or polished or perfect. I need honest. I need someone who'll stand beside me in a gunfight. Someone who'll dig for water until her hands bleed. Someone who'll plant my dead wife's seeds and honor what came before while building what comes next." I held up the ring. "That's you. All of that and more. So marry me. Proper. In the church with the whole town watching." "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'll marry you." I slid the ring on her finger. Loose. She'd need thread to keep it from slipping, but it looked right on her hand. We held the wedding 2 weeks later. Pastor Reynolds officiated. The whole town came. Grace wore a dress Mrs. Harper helped her make. Simple calico, but clean and new. I wore my Sunday best. Tom walked Grace down the aisle, his hand bandaged but healing. He gave her away with tears in his eyes. The vows were traditional, but when we exchanged rings I added my own words. "I promise to see you, really see you, not what I wish you were or fear you'll become, just who you are. And I promise to fight for you, not just against men with guns, but against drought and doubt and all the ways this world tries to break us." Grace's vow made my throat tight. I promised to stay. through drought and plenty, through threat and safety, through every hard thing this land throws at us. I promise to be honest, to tell you when I'm scared, to ask for help when I need it, and I promise to love you, not just today when it's easy, but on the hard days, especially on the hard days. I pulled out the tin cup, the same one from that first day, filled it with water from the spring Grace had found, water from the spring you discovered, the spring that saved us. We both drank. Then Pastor Reynolds pronounced us husband and wife. The kiss was gentle, sweet, full of promise. Mrs. Harper had made preserves from Grace's tomatoes. Someone brought a fiddle. We danced clumsy and laughing. Even the marshal stayed for supper. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. It was ours. That evening we went home. I carried Grace over the threshold. The 2 rocking chairs waited on the porch. We sat together, watched the sunset paint the sky gold and orange and deep purple. The garden spread before us full of harvest. "I'm glad you came," I said. "I'm glad you gave me coffee." We rocked in comfortable silence. Then Grace spoke again. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air. I turned to look at her. She was smiling, nervous but happy. "You're sure been sure for 2 weeks. Wanted to wait until after the wedding to tell you." I pulled her close, kissed her forehead. A baby. Our baby. Beth's garden. Grace's water. Our child. The land continuing. Life continuing. 3 months later, as snow began to fall, I thought about legacy, about what we leave behind, about the stories that outlive us. Beth's memory was honored. Her garden thrived under Grace's care. Her seeds produced food that would feed our child. Shaw was dead, justice served, the railroad rerouted, our land secure. Red Carver hanged for his crimes, the other ranchers safe. Grace stood at the window, hand on her growing belly, watching snow cover the prairie in white. She was strong, healthy, happy. I walked up behind her, put my arms around her, felt our child move between us. "You taught me something," I said. "What's that?" "That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth. About who you are, what you need, what you're willing to fight for." I needed honest, not fancy. And I got it. She turned in my arms, kissed me. "We'll tell our child about Beth someday, about the seeds, about finding water in dry land, about standing up to evil men. We'll tell them about courage, too, about a woman who stepped off a stage and told the truth about her freckled face." She laughed. "That's not very romantic. Don't need romantic." Got real instead. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, fire crackled in the stove. The house was warm, full of life and love and the promise of more to come. The tin cup sat on the shelf, a reminder of beginnings, of the day a stranger became family. Spring would come, the garden would grow again. Our child would be born into a home where parents chose each other, chose to stay, chose to fight. I thought about strength, real strength. Not the absence of breaking, but breaking and choosing to heal. Losing everything and choosing to build again. Standing in the face of death and saying, "I choose life. I choose love. I choose to stay." Grace had taught me that. This woman who wasn't pretty by any measure the world used, but was beautiful in ways that mattered, in ways that lasted. The land would remember us. The garden would remember us. Our children would carry our stories forward. That was legacy enough. I pulled Grace closer, felt her lean into me, felt our child move between us, felt the weight of the past and the promise of the future balanced in this single moment. Some things are worth fighting for. Some people are worth dying for. Grace was both, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. The snow fell soft and steady, covering the scars, making everything new. And in the morning we'd wake together, make coffee in the tin cup, sit in our rocking chairs and plan for spring, for planting, for growth, for the life we'd built from honesty and hard work and the simple willingness to stay when staying was the hardest thing. I needed honest, not fancy, and honest was exactly what I'd found.